Përshëndetje dëgjues të podcastit Community Voice. Në këtë episod do të bisedojmë për politikat sociale që realizohen në kuadrin e integrimit të minoritetit Rom në Shqipëri dhe në Evropë. Sa ata realizohen dhe sa janë të dështuara. Në studio me ne është Zelkjo Jovanovic, drejtuesi i Roma Initiaves Office, që prej vitesh mbështet minoritetin Rom në Evropë për të integruar. It's a pleasure to have you in our studio. Thanks for coming by. I will start with the first questions. What are your plans for the next 10 years for the integration of Roma in Albania and Europe?
Well, next 10 years, as you can see in the world, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen in the context, and we as a minority, and especially the minority that is in disadvantaged position than other people in our countries, always need to adapt to the context. But as you can see, we already have 3 war situations that exploded in the recent weeks and months. Ukraine started earlier, but it's very difficult to talk about 10 years without guessing what is the context. But I think if we avoid a major war in European, within the continent, besides Ukraine, I think the struggle is always going to be political. As we know, politics is not only about elections, it's about everyday decisions that governments and public administration make. And we need, as the largest minority in Europe, we need to pull our strength together. And what we wish to do is to make a significant contribution, that we unify the forces among the Roma within a country and within the continent, that we build a bigger political relevance, and through that improve the conditions of our people on the ground. 10 years is, I would say, good period to see if there is progress, but at the same time, knowing that our community lives in most difficult situation for decades and centuries, 10 years is not enough to make so significant progress that our people can feel. But at the same time, our plan is to try to do our best to increase our relevance in the sphere of policy making, sphere of political engagement of our voters, so our power can be felt in our countries and in Europe.
Great. I know 10 years is a big time to think and do it, but where will be your focus mainly?
We will focus on 3 main areas. First area, as I mentioned, is that we help our voters get better organized before and after elections. So we want to use the fact that we are citizens of our countries, that our voters, as many know, are often suppressed, manipulated.
Yes.
Political parties come for elections to get our votes and never come back after elections. So this is something we will try to reverse as much as we can. The second is that we try to use the fact that we are the youngest population in Europe and invest in programs that can capitalize on the labor force. Because Europe is an aging continent, definitely a continent that already has problems with the labor force. So if Europe needs workers from different parts of the globe, why shouldn't Europe invest in its own citizens who are Roma, in education, in employment, in health? So we also are part of the solution for the shortage of labor force. I usually take example of Germany, the strongest economy in the EU. Even that economy, according to research, needs 400,000 workers per year, new workers, to maintain its dominance. You can only imagine what much weaker economies in Europe, like Albania, like Serbia, like Macedonia, and others in the region, how much they need a workforce to maintain their own economic advancement or economic survival even, knowing that there is a very strong emigration. So a lot of people from this region go to the Western Europe because Western Europe needs workers. So who is going to stay here and work here? Where the carpenters, plumbers, where the sellers in shopping malls and stores will come from? Who is going to work so to pay taxes and pay for teacher salaries, pensions, etc., etc. So we have a population that is young. We have even younger population in the region than Albanians, which are known to be young population. So our population is even younger than that. So I see a big potential for seeing the Roma community in the region as a case for investment. We are not here to seek for social welfare. What we need is investment in our labor force, and all the investment will be returned. We did some kind of research, actually economic simulation, that if we invest, just as an example, not in long-term education for engineers and doctors, etc., short-term vocational training, for example, truck drivers, that are needed in the region. So the return on that investment comes back in 2 to 3 years. So this is not about government needs to spend money on Roma integration. No. The government needs to invest in the labor force, and the money will come back to the public budget. So that's the second area we want to work on. And the third area is the strengthening of our own identity, because in the times that we live in, when nationalism is stronger and stronger, where the majorities insist more and more on them being kind of superior to the minorities in their countries, that narrative is very dangerous for Roma, because Roma are seen as the subordinate, as always with all the negative characteristics of human beings. And being Roma today is a matter of courage. Saying that you are Roma is a matter of courage. It's a matter of dignity. It's a matter of human decency, that you can be free to say who you are. You don't need to present yourself as somebody else. So we want to invest in our people feeling dignified and proud for being Roma. So we don't need to try to pretend that we are somebody else. So in that sense, we want to invest in the domain of arts and culture. And on the other hand, we also want to present our own story, our own narrative, our own history in such a way that we make clear that the myths and legends about us are simply not only not true, but they don't affect us. They don't hurt us anymore, because many of the Roma, unfortunately, under the pressure of education, of media, from the majority, from other minorities, we internalized our stereotype. We believe that these stereotypes are true. So we want to get rid of that. We want to invest in some sort of strengthening of our sense of dignity, our own sense of worth, and our sense of unity across the borders, across different dialects, across different religions, etc., etc., that we still can be one people that support each other and stimulate that kind of solidarity among Roma across Europe.
This is very true, because our folks and community voice is inviting people who are from Roma community or Jewish communities. We invite them for only one reason: to express themselves. They are from Roma community or other communities, and to be respectful in the media. What I mean is that people to get know that you are Roma and you have a profession. For example, we have good artists here. But the problem is they express themselves as an artist, but not as a Roma. They will express after 20 minutes of the interview. But we wanted like to say, I'm Roma, for example, I do this profession. This is our main reason, because in my previous experiences in public television of Albania, I've been working them covering those minorities, and people from local cities, they self-declare that they are from communities like Roma or Jewish communities with self-enjoy. They are from, and we need to say this because we are from these minorities, and we need to say this. But here, when we are in a capital, it's hard people to say it publicly, and this is the reason that we are doing this job.
Right.
To express yourself, what you are, and what you can do for society.
Right.
Because we have 100,000 artists.
Right.
But you are different.
Let me tell you how, for example, the founder and funder of Open Society Foundations, Mr. George Soros, how he speaks about that. When people ask him how his vision of open society comes together when people look at his investment in Roma culture, Roma identity, even Roma scholarships.
Yes.
Because some people ask him, why is it important to be Roma? People should be good students, and they get a scholarship for being good students. And this was his answer. He says, I want to support Roma students, I want to support Roma advocates, because being Roma is something that is negative in our societies. So when you have Roma who don't want to recognize and publicly say that they are Roma, maybe individually, if they are lighter skin, or maybe in Western Europe that is more multicultural, that they can pass. Other people might say, okay, maybe they are not Roma.
Yes.
But the problem is that the stereotype remains.
It's not.
So individually, in the words and thinking of George Soros, individually you can progress, but collectively the community still suffers negative stereotype. So once, in the words of George Soros, once I support Roma to be successful and remain Roma, this is what breaks negative stereotype. Just being successful and hiding that you are Roma or presenting yourself as somebody else doesn't break the stereotype. We need to get used to the idea that Roma can be successful and remain Roma, proud Roma. And he says, this is why I support those who openly declare their ethnicity as Roma, because it is not only about them individually, it is about Roma collectively, a negative stereotype about Roma, but it's also about the idea of open society, that open society is a society in which people are free to be who they are, and which we can see that one person can be both proud Roma and also successful individual.
Yeah, this is very true, and I have been like seeking this kind of theory about being open. Mostly in Albania, we have this problem with negative stereotypes, and like you have to see, like every month we have another case from Commissioner for Protection of Discrimination that says we found discrimination. We found discrimination here. We found discrimination in labor office or in institution. Things are changing, but they're changing a little bit. It's like the questions that are coming right now. As one of the leaders in Europe, do you think that Roma still need integration policies based on even the status you brought on LinkedIn or other social network? Because I saw this and I was thinking only for this interview. What do you think? Do we still need policies again?
Look.
Because I remember in the 19th they started doing like policies for the Roma and Egyptian communities, only for those two minorities, not others. Like every 4 years, they they invite us, we speak with them, they do all of this, reports. And now we have like the local national plans, local plans.
Right.
What do you think?
So, thank you for the question. Obviously, I can see you read my post
Yes.
after the conference in Skopje, in North Macedonia. So, it's a complex question. Let me start from the key word that many people dislike these days, which is integration.
Yes.
So, this word about Roma integration is very much attacked because people are fed up anymore to speak about integration like we are not part of the society, so we need to become part of the societies. People also say integration is about becoming part of the society and losing your identity, etc., etc. But let's just forget the context of Roma for the time being and speak about European integration. When you look at the word or concept or idea of integration, in that context, what European integration means? It means that countries that were not part of the EU, they become part of the EU, but what do they get out of it? They also get a seat around the table to decide about the EU.
Yes, normally.
So every country that got in the EU through the EU integration process, they also have a decision-making power.
Yeah, they have the right.
Exactly. So more European integration means that all the members of the EU decide on the common policies. So when I look at the idea of what integration means, that also means that Roma integration means that we also get the seat around the table to make decisions about society that we live in.
Normal.
Right? So when we say Roma integration, in my mind, this is about us getting a seat around the table. Now, when you again look at the European integration, let's take Hungary as an example, or Romania, or Bulgaria. Those countries now sit around the table and they decide EU policies, not only about their own country, but about all the countries.
All the countries.
So when you go back to Roma integration, we shouldn't be only sitting around the table and discussing Roma policies. We need to sit around the table and discuss all the policies. So the answer to your question, whether we need Roma policies, yes and no. Yes, because for many, many years in the past, we knew that we need to have some sort of special political attention on the problems that are usually not usually on the table when politicians make decisions about their priorities in the government or their budget or institutional reforms. Roma were not there, so we say we need a Roma policy so that the governments focus and pay attention to it. And this trend started, I think even you mentioned, 25 years ago.
Yes.
Right? But today, the time has changed so much that we are not anymore so present on the international agenda. There are many other priorities since financial crisis, migration crisis, then COVID, then there were terrorist attacks, etc., etc. We are not anymore in the public discussion like before, except that when there is some incident or protest and so on. So today, when we want specific policies for Roma, we are actually getting less and less attention. So the more we insist on specific Roma policies, the less attention we get. So it is a difficult situation to say, no, we don't, because we still believe we need the special attention. But we also need to recognize, yes, this is not working, because when you have specific Roma policy, it is somewhere on the margin of the political process, because no major political figures, political players, political parties, politicians pay attention to it. So if you ask me today, I think what we need is to look at mainstream policies where there are political interest, political attention, etc. For example, economic recovery after COVID.
Yes.
And we need to say there how this policy, which is not Roma targeted policy, how this policy should make a difference in the lives of Roma. So in that sense, we need to shift our point of view and engage where actual attention is, where actual public and EU budgets are, if we want to influence the resources for us. So I give you a little bit longer answer, but because the question you pose is very, very complex, and many of our friends and brothers and sisters who are Roma advocates, they still believe we still need specific Roma policies. And I understand why people are saying this, but I don't think this is politically viable in this moment of time.
It's normally, I agree with you, because, for example, here in Albania, we have 7 municipalities that have local plans for Roma integration.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen these local plans. It costs a lot of million of euros. They have activities to be done. For example, in neighborhood in Beira, they need to reconstruct the roads, to put the waters in the canal, to put some electricity, like public electricity, but it's nothing done. I have been there. Like, where is the investment? Why they put in the activities, like, for example, 20 million euros, they need to do this. But never happened. These plans are now expired. They expired last year, and they are thinking to do another 4 years. But still the same situation. They start like 10 years, they will do this road and never finish.
But Braden, let me then, I know this is not my role to ask you questions, but this is just a rhetorical question
yes.
for the sake of seeing this just with one step further. Imagine you are a politician, but imagine you are not who you are today, but you are an Albanian politician. And then you say, okay, there is this Roma policy. And this policy costs, to make a real difference, 5 billion euros. Okay. Now, as a politician, you look at the budget of your municipality.
Yes, normal.
Where this 5 billion will come from? So maybe we have this money, but we need to cut from some other priority and give it for Roma, yeah? So you would then, as a politician, say, if I cut it, I need to explain to my voters why I'm cutting from them and their streets and their sewage and their water pipes and so on, infrastructure, to give it to Roma. Then you say, if I do that, I'm gonna lose votes.
Yeah, normally this is a good theory, but
this is practice. It's not a theory.
If you see the plans, I have it back. The money come from donors.
But this is the whole point. Yes, but this is the whole point.
Mostly the money come from donors.
Yes.
They said 200,000 euros we will put from donors, and only we will put 3,000 or 3 million.
Yes.
The local government.
Yes.
All the monies come from donors. Where are the money, for example?
But let's just go then in your approach. Okay. So I get money from EU or other donors, yeah?
Yeah.
And I put a little bit of money from the municipality. Although this is also not okay, because we are citizens. We deserve to have investment from the domestic budget because we pay taxes for it, yeah? But okay, let's say hypothetically there is a donor who will give money. But still, for my voters, as an Albanian, for whom most of Albanians, some Roma, vote, okay? Yes. For those voters, it doesn't matter if the money comes from donors or from the local budget. What they see is that Roma gets something.
Yeah,
and it will again be a problem for me to explain why I give him to Roma, and because they see the Roma as not deserving support because of all the negative stereotypes. So I'll give you how this looks on a much bigger scale. We were looking at how the EU used much bigger funds than in Albania in the last years, because there were EU funds for Roma in Bulgaria, in Romania, Hungary, and so on. So what is happening at that moment is that EU says, we tell to the governments, use money for Roma. As you say, it's a good compromise, yeah? But then governments move the money that was planned for Roma to something else, and this money is being lost. Why? Because they know if they do something positive for Roma, non-Roma will not vote for them in the next elections. So they will lose the votes. This is why we are looking at the aspect of how we can be better organized as voters, not how do we resist the pressure that comes on our voters before elections and say, okay, you will lose some of the non-Roma voters, but you will get our votes if you do an infrastructural project in our community. So then we can be a different negotiator, different partner in this game. This is why our self-organization at the community level, as voters, as citizens, really matters.
Yeah, this is a good idea and good approach, I think. Actually, in Albania, we have the census, the registration of population.
Yes.
They started in 1st October and they will last till 1st November. Right now, there are a lot of problems that we have identified. As we speak about why they need to invest with the Romas, the same is happening. The interviews are not asking the Roma people or other minorities, what minority do you have?
Mm-hmm.
They are not asking, and the people are not answering this question. They are just answering basic question. It happens to me and all of my colleagues that pretend we are like intellectual, we have university, we work in civil society, and after this they didn't ask us. What do you think? Do you have any idea what's happening in Albania right now regarding?
Not really, because we haven't been active in the recent years in Albania, but we've seen this in other countries, because we worked on census in North Macedonia, in Serbia, in Romania, Bulgaria, etc. So this is a typical thing, that statistical offices usually, I don't know how it's Albania, I don't want to generalize for Albania, but we've seen that a lot of negative attitudes come from public administration towards the Roma and statistical offices as well. So for them, this question is, on the one hand, not important. On the other hand, it is a part of an assimilationist tendency that populations in the region are getting smaller. So North Macedonians have a problem because their population is getting smaller. Serbians too, as well as Bulgarians, because on the one hand, society is aging, on the other hand, population is leaving to the Western Europe. So we've seen this trend already, but even if there is a question about ethnicity, we've seen that census takers come to our homes and they often don't ask the question, or they fulfill that question, the answer, themselves. So we have to resist that. I think that perhaps now it's too late, because when the questionnaire was to be defined, was the right time to intervene. Now it's maybe too late, but we need also to go to Eurostat and to other important institutions and speak about this. Maybe even boycott the census if it doesn't work for us, because you cannot have targeted measures for certain communities, whether they are ethnic or on any other basis, if you don't have basic statistics. This is not only administrative operation. This is par excellence a political operation.
Normally.
Because resources and public policies should be defined on realistic numbers. If you have no realistic numbers, you don't have effective policies.
For example, in our questionnaire, they have the question about minorities, and they list all the minorities, but they are not obligated to ask. So the civil society has been working a lot to put the question in the questionnaire. They work it to be required questions, but they in the end they put the questions, but the census takers, they don't ask.
This is very weird, so to say.
Because we had a problem with Greek minorities in Albania, because they believe they are a larger number than other minorities.
Yes.
And if they can be a lot of people, numbers, they can have more rights, for example.
Yes.
This is a problem that every 10 years has been discussed in public opinion. But still, we have this big problem because we had a lot of families who are not very, they don't express themselves, but they are. But if you ask, they will do it.
Of course.
For example, Roma, they declare, we are Roma, they say. Mostly in other cities they do it. But people, the interviews, this is a problem.
For example, in Hungary, they didn't, I think they didn't directly ask if you are Roma. They asked about the language, if I'm not mistaken. What languages you speak, and then list of languages. So if you speak Romani language, you are Roma. Of course, there are Roma who don't speak Romani language, so it's a problem, but it's another approach. But this is very strange to me that you have a questionnaire and some questions are not obligatory to be asked. I could understand if
we have two questions: is the minority and the religion. That the interviews cannot. It's not obligated to ask.
But this is weird for me. That is not obligatory to ask. For me, it could be understandable that people are not obliged to respond to the question, but that census takers choose not to ask. This is very strange.
And even these interviews are asking people, if you are Roma, do you have passport that you are Roma?
Oh my God.
Because this is the level of the trainings that have been made done from the Institute of Statistics. So exist a lot of problems doing this. We have been contacting with our colleagues. We have to do something or a protest because we cannot change nothing now. We can boycott, as we boycott in 2011. The statistics are very funny. There are only 8,000 Roma in Albania and 4,000 Egyptians in Albania, for example.
And what are the informal estimates?
Now, Ministry of Social Welfare, they declared we have 10,000 children of Roma community that we deliver books. So, in 2011 we have 8,000 people.
And 10,000 children.
And now we have 10,000 children.
What a joke.
This is a real problem, and we believe that the numbers are not getting real. I know that the numbers will never get real, but you have to go to like 80% of the people. No, they are not 10,000.
It's incredible.
And Albania is the one country that recognized by law the minorities. As a media, our mission is that to empower this community in media. Do you think Albania has taken sufficient steps for integration of the minority? In our daily work, we see a lot of problems. But in your vision?
Look,
because even the EU before asked that they have to respect the minority rights if you want to be part of EU.
Yeah, I don't think we should put a lot of emphasis on the EU. Because EU will not save us alone. When you look every country that already entered the EU, there are problems maybe even bigger than in Albania, and they're still in the EU. EU now has to deal with its own problems in the region because there is a geopolitical competition in the region. You have China, you have Russia, you have Saudi Arabia, a lot of players, plus the EU itself doesn't have always a common voice. There are conflicts within the EU, what their decisions really are. So I don't think that the EU will pay too big of an attention to us. This is why my message is always, we need to reorganize ourselves internally to be taken more seriously. Without that, we cannot expect the EU or anyone else will block a country on the way to the EU because of us. That didn't happen in the past, it's not going to happen in the future.
Yeah, but this is a good idea, but the Albanian peoples, they always believe on you as a family and you as embassy. And always people are seeing this to big institutions to be part of this, like in Europe. This is why my question, because all the policies, they came from recommendation, because Albania, delegation of European Union in Albania is taking a lot of part to do like policies for.
But I don't deny that, Braden. I agree with that. I'm just saying this is not enough. This is far from enough, because at some point the EU will need to decide what is a priority for them. That EU is the most important player in the region, or that they will pay attention to Roma.
Yeah.
This is not gonna be ever enough, as it didn't in the past. In the previous stage of EU enlargement, when Romania, Bulgaria, and other countries joined, they knew that problems of Roma are far from being resolved. Actually, in many of these countries, the situation of Roma got worse once they got in the EU, because there was no more political pressure. So what I'm saying is that political pressure from the EU is good, and I always welcome it. We work with European Commission in partnership, but I also see the limits of that. So the EU has many priorities. We are, maybe priority, maybe not, but we are certainly not on the top of the list. So we need to just face the reality, have no illusions. As you can see, Albania and North Macedonia were blocked by some of the EU members on the way of the EU. So EU is also having problems with its own credibility in the region. So I think with support of the United States, support of European Union, maybe some of the more open governments, we always need to say thank you very much. We are very grateful. And at the same time, say to ourselves, we know this is not enough, we have to do better. I'm not sure that we always know how to do better, but we have to continue trying, because otherwise nobody else will come to do this job instead of us. In my view, Braden, we have more talented people like yourself, like many others, friends that I know for many years, like Brasilda and Bledy and many others. You're very bright and talented. We didn't have the previous generation like that. Maybe we had bright people from the older generation of activists, but they were not so many like you. In my view, civil society is very good for you to practice, learn, and develop political skills. At certain point of time, you need to use those political skills when you see that there is a limit what you can accomplish in civil society. You will need to move in the domain of electoral politics. To move there, you need to work now on Roma as voters. We also had political representatives in many countries, and that was always an issue, whether there is an awareness, solidarity, self-organization at the level of community. We have bright individuals in the past, we had political representatives, but we need to strengthen the community collectively as voters. So when we have now the generation like yourself that is bright, better educated, practice a lot of skills, including this one, how to use the media. And in certain moment, we have also a community that is better organized as voters. They don't want to accept anymore to be bought by a pack of food or, 10, 20 euros before elections. They want roads, they want jobs, they want clean water, they want social housing, and they want to vote for politicians they trust. You and others will naturally be those that they can trust because you already work on these problems, but you have a limit. Yes. What civil society can do, there is always a limit. Over that limit is you get in a very difficult, much more difficult job to be in public institutions. This is much more difficult than civil society. You are exposed to criticism, you are exposed to blackmailing, you are exposed to too high expectations from the community. People won't change because they are fed up anymore. They won't change tomorrow, and all the problems and so on. This is much more difficult, much more risky. My thinking is that there is no other way. Unless your generation, with the support of many people around, gets to that stage, we will always come around and say, governments promised, they didn't deliver. Local mayor promised, he didn't deliver. Statistical offices make a questionnaire that doesn't recognize who we are, doesn't allow us to say who we are. So all these problems will stay. So I think that strengthening the community as voters is the top priority. And second, that our best and brightest people, some of them, maybe not all of them, but some of them make this step that is much more difficult, but much more powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. I will I want to thank you for being here and having this conversation together.
My message is that I understand why many of us are afraid to say that they are Roma, to express their identity in public. They're afraid because of what other people will tell them and how the state will use this. At the same time, we have to be courageous. We need to feel free. And my message is then more to the Albania as a country and Albanian leaders, that only if those who are most afraid, most suppressed to express their identity, once they are free to say who they are, only then Albania will be a free society. Otherwise, if Albanians and others are free to say who they are, but there are some, like Roma, who are afraid to say who they are, this country is not free. This country cannot be standing among countries in which people feel proud, feel free, feel respected, feel dignified. So for our own people, it's enough to be afraid, it's enough to be ashamed. We didn't get anything more by saying we are not Roma in the past. What is there to lose?
No.
Exactly.
Thank you. With this message, I want to conclude the podcast, and I hope the people enjoy this interview and gets a lot of message to be more booster for the society.
Thank you, Brayden. Thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for inviting me here. And I had a real pleasure to talk to you.
It's our pleasure to have you here. Thank you.